So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. We have a truly inspiring panel talk where we're going to be discussing the importance of civil resistance because we are quite frankly done with watching the government's death project of new oil and gas, and as our universities are just sitting by. We are recording this call, but it will only be the speakers who are seen, and it will then be uploaded onto the Just Stop Oil YouTube channel over the next few days. So do feel free to share it with your friends and family who can't make it tonight. Captions are in the captions option is enabled if you do need to use them. You can just turn them on your toolbar. The call will be about 90 minutes. And if you do come across any trolls, do let Tech or the co-hosts know via the chat function and they will deal with it. So if you don't already have it during this call, we are asking people interested in joining Just Stop Oil to download the Signal Messenger app. It's through Signal that we communicate, and you can be linked to the groups that suit you best and integrated into our lovely community. And the link for that will be in the chat. So the recording will start, I believe. Amazing. So hello, good evening. I'm Emma de Saram, and I'm the president of Exeter Students' Union, and I'm one of the hundreds of young people taking action with Just Stop Oil because we refuse to sit by and watch as the UK government burns our futures in front of our eyes. Our government are laughing in the face of the most reputable scientists, saying we must stop new oil and gas by licensing new oil and gas projects, which they know will kill millions of people. The UK's top food security experts have recently stated that we could face civil unrest in the coming decades due to climate-triggered food shortages. That's empty shelves and fights over bread. I started taking action with Just Stop Oil when I realised I wasn't being told this truth. Throughout my recovery from anorexia, I was told the world had so many opportunities waiting for me if I could just get better. Once I was discharged, the intensity of the climate crisis has occupied my life. I, like many students, have tried things the nice way, asking our universities to divest, litter picking, recycling, going vegan, but none of this is enough. None of this is going to create the urgent change we need right now. At my university, the University of Exeter, they're actively partnering with Shell, one of the biggest polluters globally and responsible for destroying communities in their pursuit for profit. And my university are gaining £14 million from it. I have committed too many hours of my life trying to change their minds, but appealing to the moral conscience of those in power is not enough, as millions of people are losing their family members, their health, and their livelihoods to the climate crisis. Now I've found Just Stop Oil, I'm finally going to be putting my body where my morals and the science are. In November, I will be back on the streets in London, risking arrest myself with thousands of others marching to demand no new oil and gas. In the Netherlands, only a week or so ago, after 27 days of ordinary people blocking the road and 9,000 people being arrested, the government has been forced to come up with a plan to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. That's because the police got overwhelmed and people power won, as it always has, and we can do the same here. A recent scientific paper has said that if global warming reaches or exceeds 2 degrees this century, mainly richer humans will be responsible for killing roughly 1 billion poorer humans through global warming. In September this year, we reached 1.8 degrees. This situation is catastrophically urgent, and we are on the edge of triggering deadly tipping points. As we are speaking tonight, we must acknowledge how deeply interlinked the climate crisis is to global injustice and violence. The people of Palestine have been experiencing a systematic genocide for decades. The apartheid state of Israel is escalating this to terrifying levels, trying to finish their racist project. The people of Palestine have exhibited resistance in all forms. During the Great March of Return, hundreds of Palestinians were murdered for non-violent protest. We must remember their actions when we call for the liberation of Palestine. Another racist project that's spiraling out of control is the climate crisis. We know it will bring death, conflict, and displacement. It already is. Hundreds of millions, if not billions, will be forced to migrate. As we defend their right to stay, we also need to stand up for their right to move with safety and with dignity. Climate justice means justice for all people. We won't look away from the war in Gaza, and we demand the liberation of Palestine. We won't look away from the climate crisis, and we will continue our resistance to new oil and gas. I've always been someone to follow the rules, but as a history student who spent years studying social change, I know that people in Just Stop Oil are following the rules of history, because non-violent direct action and breaking the rules has won us the rights we take for granted today, and it could one day mean our survival. The situation we are in now is catastrophically urgent, and I'd really urge you to use today as the day that you choose to sign up to be on the right side of history. Tonight, I am joined by an amazing panel of speakers, including George Monbiot, artist Roux, Kamya, and Just Stop Oil supporters Harley and Holly. After hearing these amazing people, you will undoubtedly be inspired and raring to go into action and onto the streets. So we will then go into breakout rooms, which are a space for you to join an amazing Just Stop Oil facilitator in a smaller room to discuss how you felt from the talk and what you can do going forward. This will last for around 20 minutes. But before the breakout room, there will be a poll launched, and we would love you to take 2 seconds to do it. And it's just to see what pathways to action you are wanting to take. Now, the pathways to action are, number one, lots of people are committing to taking action and risking arrest, including myself, at least once. You can slow march in your region, or in London, we will be marching every day from the 30th of October. The second way is people are attending non-violence training to learn the skills and resilience to join us in civil resistance and feel part of our community of trust. Number three, people are donating around 1 hour's income a month, and these links will be in the chat now. And this can ensure that everyone who wants to join the campaign can play their vital part. And number four, if you are a student and inspired by our amazing Just Stop Oil student supporters, some of whom are going to be like breakout group facilitators, then you can meet with your local uni group at an upcoming social, and the link for the chat should be in there too. So that's enough of me talking. Without further ado, let's welcome the one and only George Monbiot, who did also low-key radicalize me when I was a little bit younger. So it's wonderful to speak to you. George Monbiot, if you need an introduction, is a best-selling author, environmental activist, and Guardian columnist. His works include Feral, Rewilding the Land, Sea and Human Life, and Heat, How to Stop the Planet Burning. George has made several viral videos, including How Wolves Change Rivers, which had over 40 million views, and Nature Now, co-presented with the one and only Greta Thunberg, who you may have seen was arrested the other day. Big up Greta. In 2022, George was awarded the Orwell Prize for Journalism, and his latest book, Regenesis, Feeding the World Without Devouring the Planet, explains why farming is the world's greatest cause of environmental destruction, drawing on astonishing advances in soil ecology to explore pioneering ways to grow more food with less farming. We are so pleased to have you here, George. And the first question I'd love to ask you is, what gives you hope, maybe from history or other social movements, that young people will stand up and fight back hard enough to win in this monumental struggle?
Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you to Just Stop Oil for keeping hope alive, because fundamentally, yeah, you guys are what give me hope. And there are sound reasons for this. You know, this isn't hopium. This isn't a wild hope. This is a hope which is soundly based, not just in history, but also in systems science. And while Emma has asked me primarily about history, and of course there's lots that we can draw on there, and what history shows us is that protest and civil disobedience are absolutely essential to democratic change. You can't do it without them. They are a key component of every single liberty, every single improvement that human beings have ever secured has come about with the help of nonviolent direct action and civil disobedience. I would like largely, if I may, to talk about the systems approach, because actually this is where, for me, the real hope and excitement comes from. Because as many of you will be aware, what we're dealing with are complex systems. Earth systems are complex systems. They have properties which are completely different to those of simple systems. And they keep taking us by surprise, because when we're taught about them, unless you're taking a specialist degree at school, if we're taught incidentally about them in other degrees, other than a few very particular ones which will teach you properly about systems, we're taught about them as if they are simple systems. We're taught about them with the aid of circuit diagrams, as if you're looking at an electrical circuit or a plumbing diagram. And it's as if you were being taught maths and told it was French. These are completely different things. A complex system is radically different to a simple system. Complex systems have emergent and adaptive properties. They're self-organizing. They're the result of billions of random interactions which create organizational structure apparently out of nothing. They keep taking us by surprise because it's counterintuitive. In fact, the only difference between a complex system and a form of intelligent life is a degree of scale. It's all on the same spectrum. Intelligent life is just a particular kind of complex system. And in fact, there's various complex systems we're now looking at which bear striking resemblances to intelligent life and force us to reconsider where the boundaries of intelligent life might lie. Now, all our Earth systems, our life support systems, are complex systems, and that means, in common with the others, they have tipping points. They have critical thresholds, and if they're pushed over those thresholds, they collapse into a different equilibrium state. And that is an equilibrium state other than the one in which we and most of life on Earth evolved. That is an equilibrium state which would be hostile to us and most of the other species with which we share this planet. So that is what we are seeking to avoid. We are seeking to avoid the global tipping of Earth systems, not just the atmospheric system, all the other systems with which it's intimately connected, the oceanic system, the soils, the forests, the cryosphere, the ice and snow, all these other crucial Earth systems which all together form one big Earth system. There are no clear boundaries between them. If one goes down, it could pull down the others. But there's another complex system which also has adaptive and emergent properties and also has critical thresholds and tipping points. And that complex system is called society. Society does not change in linear and gradual ways because society is a complex system. Like any complex system, it absorbs shock, it absorbs pressure, and it will damp it down within a certain range of resilience. But if it's pushed out of that range of resilience, instead of damping it down with negative feedbacks, it will exacerbate those shocks with positive feedback. In other words, the shocks will ramp themselves up and will propagate across the system. Now, society also has a peculiar characteristic. On top of those common characteristics of complex systems, it also has a peculiar characteristic that its tipping points are accelerated and reinforced by social conformity, by not wanting to be left behind. Because, with the possible exception of the naked mole rat, which is a eusocial mammal, human beings are the super social mammals. We're the most socialized of all mammals. We're the ones who are most tuned in to each other. And our whiskers are constantly twitching to see which way the social wind is blowing. And if we think the wind has changed, we do not want to be left behind. We will swing round to catch that wind. As a result of this, most people, most of the time, regardless of the situation in which they live, side with the status quo for better or for worse. And very often it's for worse. People will side with fascism. They will side with horrendous governments and regimes because they don't want to be left out. I mean, there's fear obviously there as well, but the force of conformity is a very powerful one. If you can change the status quo for the better, most people will swing round to side with it regardless of their prior positions. And this reinforces the tipping, the inherent nature of a complex system, which is that it has critical thresholds. And we now know, and this is, I think, the most exciting thing I've ever come across in my entire career, and the most hope-giving thing, we now know roughly where those thresholds are, because there's been a series of scientific papers published based both on observational studies and experimental studies, and they all come down to roughly the same conclusion, that it's about 25%. If about a quarter of your society become committed to a change, committed to a new way of doing things, that is the point at which you pass the critical threshold and society tips into a new equilibrium state. And that can be a very positive thing. If you're in a very dysfunctional equilibrium state, if you've got a sort of social dysbiosis, you want to tip out of it into a different state. And we can tip out of it into a far more positive state. What this science tells you is you don't have to persuade everyone. I spent the early part of my career accepting the adage that you shouldn't preach to the converted, you shouldn't preach to the choir. How wrong I was. It was just exactly the wrong advice. Who else are you going to preach to? Who else is going to listen to you? You preach to the choir, but you expand the concentric circles of the people who are prepared to listen to you. And you might start, with 5% of the population, and then you just push it outwards and outwards and outwards. The aim is to hit that 25% threshold. And at that point, it doesn't matter where everybody else is, because almost everyone is going to swing round to where you are. So, you might think, oh, it's completely hopeless because my grumpy father-in-law reading the Daily Mail, he's never going to accept the things that we're saying. He's never going to accept that we need a radical change in our economy, a radical change in our modes of organization, a radical change in the technologies we use, all of those things. He's just never going to accept that. He doesn't have to accept that, because after the tipping has happened, he'll just go along with it. After the war, everyone in France became a member of the resistance, right? You go to any French town, you don't find the Place de la Collaborateur, you find the Place de la Résistance everywhere, and people will genuinely believe that they were part of the resistance. I've come across, I know one person who will swear, he'd say, well, of course, I've always believed in equal marriage. And I know for a fact he was adamantly opposed to the idea of equal marriage. But if that's what he wants to believe, that's fine. Because after the tipping on equal marriage happened, and it was a very dramatic tipping, he swung around behind it, like almost everybody did. And you'd have to be an idiot now to stand up publicly and say I'm against it, because you alienate yourself from society in doing so. So we've seen these tippings happen again and again, and some of them have been very dramatic. And equal marriage is a good example of that, because when I was the average age of most of the people in this meeting, it was just unthinkable. It seemed impossible. Like so much of what we want seems impossible, and then suddenly it becomes inevitable. It didn't happen by itself. It wasn't an accident. You had some brilliant gay rights campaigners who had a theory of change. They knew what the strategy was. You expand those concentric circles. You absorb all the shit which is thrown at you, and you just find ways of living through it. And God, most horrendous things were said about people, were said to people, but you just weather it. You weather it. The two most important qualities of any campaigner are 1, persistence, and 2, resilience. Those are the two things which we all have to have and work on. So we have to look after ourselves. We have to look after each other so that we can keep going, so we can persist, so we're resilient. And gay rights activists are a really wonderful model of that, just fighting against massive social forces, and then expanding and expanding and expanding, never convincing the majority of society. That didn't happen, but they hit that critical threshold, society tipped, and suddenly, right across Western Europe, it was effectively impossible for governments to resist. And even David Cameron's horrible right-wing, vicious, socially conservative government found itself obliged to pass equal marriage legislation. And we've seen this with many, many issues, with sexual liberation, with the idea of that people born out of wedlock were legitimate members of society. That was unthinkable about 70 or 80 years ago, but we don't even think about it at all now. The idea of that, you shouldn't pollute people with your secondhand cigarette smoke. I mean, again, when I was in my 20s, every public space was just a massive fug of blue smoke. And in all of those issues, you were just banging up against these brick walls where people say, no, it's impossible. You can't change. No, that's just the way it is. That is settled. That can't change. And it seemed like that. It felt like that. It felt it was impossible. And then suddenly, bang, it's inevitable. That's what's going to happen with this campaign. That's what we're going to do. We're pushing and pushing to expand those concentric circles, and eventually we're going to hit 25%. And then what seems impossible now becomes inevitable. So the key question now, perhaps the most important question that society has ever faced, is can we hit the social tipping point before we hit the environmental tipping points? Thank you.
Thank you so much, George. Really inspiring and hopeful. Yeah, I've taken a lot from that, and I'm sure everyone else has. So thank you so much. It really means a lot to have your support. So moving on from one amazing human to another amazing human. Our next speaker is a very dear friend to Just Stop Oil, coming from Students Against EACOP, which is against the East African Crude Oil Pipeline Project in Uganda. Carlos Kamya is a passionate climate activist pursuing a degree in accounting and finance at Lira University. At the head of communications for Students Against EACOP in Uganda, he's been on the front lines on the fight for climate justice. Carlos was among the brave student climate activists arrested at the Ugandan parliament on May the 5th, 2022, while advocating against soaring commodity prices attributed to climate change. His dedication led to a 2-week stint in prison, an experience that has only fueled his unwavering commitment to the cause. Despite facing arrest and threats during numerous climate strikes, Carlos's determination remains resolute. Carlos, thank you so much for joining us.
So much, Emma. Thank you so much, George. I've been inspired by your speech and I've learned a lot. Well, my name is Carlos Kamya. I'm a youth climate activist from Uganda. And just like Emma said, I'm from Students Against EACOP Uganda, a group of university students and schools across Uganda united in the fight against EACOP. I was wondering whether most of you have heard about EACOP, but just to say something little about EACOP. EACOP is the East African Crude Oil Pipeline that, when constructed, will be the longest heated up oil pipeline in the world, to be covering over 1,443 kilometers, and will be stretching from Lake Victoria, from Lake Albert in Hoima in Uganda, to the coast of Tanzania. Now, we as students in Uganda, we discover that EACOP will have to threaten and disrupt the livelihood and lives of many Ugandans, actually countless Ugandans, including fellow students. As I talk right now, so far, thousands of Ugandans have been affected by this EACOP. Many of them have been displaced and evicted from the areas where the EACOP will be constructed, some with little and others with no compensations. Not only that, but also our forests and plants have been destroyed. There's been gross violation of human rights, as well as wildlife, because EACOP will be passing through various national parks, to be passing through Lake Victoria, which is a source of water and livelihood to thousands of Ugandans. So just a background about EACOP. I should say that I'm very glad to talk to you today, virtually, to discuss an important topic of urgency, which is the students' revolution. Firstly, allow me convey our solidarity with Justice Oil supporters and all Justice Oil students who recently took a brave move in the recent action when they painted most universities orange. For sure, such kind of courage shows us that students across the globe are united and determined to fight for their future. What I would like to let you know that students in Uganda stand with you, and we surely admire your bravery, and we share the same determination to a sustainable future. We all know that our nation is that it hangs in balance because of the climate crisis, and the decisions we make right now will shape the future of our planet. Right now, we are here to discuss why it is very important for us to demand that government stop further investment in fossil fuels, especially by stopping and demanding government from licensing new oil and gas, and why it is necessary for civil disobedience in this fight, where governments are not willing to listen to us. We all know that right now we can't afford to remain silent when all these injustices are happening. When our governments, which we all know that have a responsibility to lead the way in the fight or to lead the way in addressing the climate crisis, but they are the ones contributing to that very crisis they should be fighting. So where does this leave us as students? This calls for the students' revolution. This calls us to act. Just like one philosopher, one writer said that whenever you see something that is not right, something that is not fair happening, something that is not good, you ought to speak, you ought to act, you ought to do something. When we keep quiet, we shall only betray ourselves and betray the futures ahead. And why then civil disobedience? Why then civil resistance? Why then with the students? Well, we all know that the current generation of students, we are very ambitious generation. We are a very united generation. We are a very persistent generation, and we are very good at action. We are the innovators, we are the thinkers, we are the leaders of tomorrow, and we make the majority population in most of the countries. But most importantly, why we need to attend to this clarion call is that our world will be the most affected by this climate crisis. And also history has had it, just like George said, that students have been at the helm of creating change in societies. We've all read or heard of how students have overthrown dictators. We've heard of how students have caused change in government. So if that was able to happen, so we believe we can also win this battle of the climate justice through civil disobedience, through protests, through sit-down strikes. We know that we can win this. We all know that civil disobedience is not a choice made lightly, but then we have no any other option, because history has proven to us that it's one of the things that can create lasting change. Just talk to you about what we students against EACOP, some of the actions we've been involved in. Just like Emma said, we've been involved in so many actions to fight these injustices. On the 25th of March this year, we staged a protest in support of the European Union resolution to stop the EACOP, because last year in October, the EU discovered that EACOP was involved with gross violation of human rights. So it made the resolutions to Uganda and Total Energies, which is the biggest project developers, to stop this deadly project. But stubbornly, just like governments don't want to listen, they didn't listen. They went ahead with having plans to have this in place. So we held the protest at the parliament. Police arrested us. Police came, arrested us, confiscated our branding materials, including banners, stickers, and 9 students were arrested, tortured, taken to court, and later taken to jail and charged with public nuisance. They spent over 2 weeks in jail and later released. And why were they released? Simply because they didn't have any crime. They did arrest them to scare them, but guess what? Most of these students came out strong, and their resolve remain strong to stop and demand government to stop further investment in fossil fuels, to demand government to stop licensing new oils. And yes, we are with them in other fights. Maybe also to talk about one of the activities that also we activities that we participated in. On 27th of June, we protested at the Parliament of Uganda when we demanded that the government of Uganda should come up with a clear stand on the EACOP project. 22 students participated, and yes, as usual, police blocked us again from accessing the speaker's office and confiscated all our branding materials. One student was arrested, and we didn't know his whereabouts for about a week, only to find out he was in critical condition, dropped in a hospital. And guess what? The local news was ordered not to report about this. I'd like also on a segment to thank Just Stop Oil and the students who stood in solidarity with us on that day when they painted the Total headquarters in the UK orange. This solidarity is one of the things that keeps us moving. It makes us know that we are not alone in this fight for the climate justice. And it gave us a lot of strength. And that's why we are still moving up to now. Despite our concerns and the concerns of different environment activists all over the world, across, even in Uganda, on the dangerous effects of EACOP, the Ugandan government continues to use excessive power to suppress, jail, and torture anti-EACOP protesters. But guess what? We are not backing down because we have no choice. This is a responsibility for us. It's not a choice. It's a responsibility to stand up for what we believe in, to stand up for what is right, and to stand up for Mother Nature. And we believe that we can win this war because so far, over 24 banks have withdrawn from the EACOP, and 4 insurance companies have also withdrawn from the EACOP. Right now, we are demanding Total because we believe Uganda cannot itself fund this project itself. We are demanding Total, which is the biggest project developer, to withdraw and not to shy away from the dangers of EACOP. We continue to call upon the government in Uganda and Total Energies not to silence our voices, because we are speaking for the voiceless. We are speaking for the marginalized. We are speaking for wildlife. We are speaking for thousands of students who have been displaced in the EACOP areas. We are speaking to the wildlife that has been displaced from its natural habitats. Apparently, as students against EACOP in Uganda, we are embarking on a countrywide capacity building to energize us in different major universities in Uganda. We are creating awareness as well as mobilizing students for more action. And just like you'll be marching in November in the UK, even us here in Uganda, students against EACOP, we are organizing for further action, but we've begun with the countrywide capacity building to rally students, to rally masses, so that we can act now, because we believe they can arrest us, they can torture us, but then we are so many, they can't finish all of us. The students' revolution calls for action. It's time for us to rise and demand that governments, both in the global south and in the global north, stop fueling our destruction, stop fueling the destruction of Mother Nature, stop fueling the climate crisis by stopping to license new oil and gas projects. Right now, I could say it's time for solidarity as students on a global scale to unite and rise up and shape the future that respects our planet, the future that will sustain our planet, the future that when we are not around, our future kids and the future generation will be proud of us. If we don't speak, no one is going to speak for us. Just like I said, we are the majority and we are a generation good at actions. I'd also like to thank you, Justice Oil supporters, for always standing in solidarity with us. Because we've seen that students have been arrested, even in the recent action where students were painting university buildings. 4 of the students were arrested. We continue standing in solidarity with you. The same human rights violation that happened in the UK, it's worse on this side of us in Uganda, because there is no rule of law. We don't have right to protest, yet our constitutions give us that right to protest. But because our governments have chosen to trade our lives for profits, they decide to arrest us. But we still say that our resolves remain strong, because we know we can achieve. We can't afford to remain silent. We can't afford to remain neutral, because if we do, neutrality always favors this oppressor, only favors this government. We have to speak, and the time is now. Now that we are united on a global scale, it gives us a better platform, it gives us a better voice to unite and cause a change that we shall be proud of. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And huge solidarity with you and all the students at Stop EACOP. And yeah, you aren't alone. We're united in this fight, but your actions and everyone are truly inspiring. So yeah, strength and solidarity. Now on to another inspiring human. We have the incredible artist Roux, aka Ellie Jackson. Now, Ellie is a Grammy award-winning, multi-million selling artist who defies simple categorization. She helped shape pop as we now know it, with era-defining hits like In for the Kill and Bulletproof, which continue to take on a new life, going viral over the pandemic. Having shot to worldwide fame as a teenager, Ellie has settled into her skin as one of Britain's most elusive but unmistakable pop icons. With her influence, Ellie uses her passion to encourage others to act and stand up to injustice, demanding we must do something and we must do it now. We are so excited to welcome you, Ellie. And the first question we would like to ask you is, so why do you think young people need to resist the current trajectory of climate breakdown? And why do we need to kick up a fuss more than ever at this point?
I think it's obviously more than ever at this point, but it's kind of been this point for a long time. I think it's just that now maybe it really feels like we can do something about it for some reason, partly because of, organizations like Just Stop Oil, but I think it's like George was saying, I think it's once you do something enough times, and it fails enough times, and then it gets bigger, and then it fails, and then you do one step back and one step forward, I think it does become, like you're saying, it becomes kind of more attractive and more acceptable. And I feel like we are reaching, I agree, I feel like we are reaching that point. And I think it is possible. I think there's also enough knowledge out there, enough conversations going on. It is often hard to have the conversations. I face backlash for talking about it ever, not that much, but I do face some of it. But you've got to be happy to have the argument. And I think there's definitely enough information now there to have the argument. There's been enough information there anyway, but now it feels like it's spreading and everybody knows it. And I think if young people now can get together now and really feel, as they should do, that their rights and their futures are being curtailed, and they can get together and really go, actually, that's really not right, and we didn't vote for it. It's not what we want. And the policies of government and the whole system of government and the way that we run our societies is not serving us. And they have every right to question that and to want to do something about it. And I think it's just interesting how much activism, how much kind of it gets demonized, when actually, if you think about it, if you actually ask somebody that that says, oh, I don't believe in this, and why did they paint this, or why did they do that? I'm like, well, first of all, what are you doing? And they're often doing nothing, or definitely always doing nothing. And then the other thing is, what would you suggest? And people often don't know what to suggest, and they never have a clue what to suggest, which is actually sort of where my turning point came, was when I remember Extinction Rebellion quite a few years back. And I remember myself being still a bit teenage-like, and I remember being sort of annoyed by it because I knew some other kind of people that maybe didn't agree with some of the actions. And I think once you start to question actually where does that come from? Where does that fear of aligning with that come from? And I think exactly that's why I was sort of so inspired by what George said, that it's just sticking with it, just going with it. And I think I can't speak as factually or as or from experience like Carlos could, but I think I was very inspired by what they said, by the way. It was really interesting to hear them talk. But yeah, I can't speak from that perspective, but I can speak from a perspective of just a normal frustrated person who was a frustrated young person, is now a frustrated nearing middle-aged person. And I would love to see the next generation do something. And I think they have to. I think they absolutely have to.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just a second other burning question, which many people will be interested to know the answer to. Was there anything in particular that made you start supporting Just Stop Oil and young people taking action to confront the insanity of what is happening?
Yeah, it was, like I say, it was partly my internal dialogue with myself, and also realizing that I'd kind of been strangely sort of couldn't work out whether I found it, and like I needed a legitimate, almost logical reason for everything that every activist group did, or I needed to see results from it or whatever. And I was like, that's so not the right way of looking at it. And I think once I started to question myself about a lot of things, actually, and I started to see how much it enraged me, seeing actually the backlash to what really decent human beings are trying to do for the sake of everybody else. I think seeing that backlash, actually, it made me so angry, and it made me feel so protective of the people that I feel are on the right side of right, or the right side of whatever this is now, and wanting to be part of it as much as I could, and also I felt I wanted to protect people that want to do the right thing, and I wanted to do the right thing as well. It doesn't take a genius to see that we don't live in a great sort of built society right now, and it doesn't take a genius to work out what's happening with nature, so I can't not see it anymore. I cannot ignore it. It's just completely impossible. So I want to do as much as I can, and I want, hopefully students will be inspired by it, probably not what I'm saying, but what everybody else is saying, and will want to take action and feel brave enough to do so as well. I think it's extremely courageous that students are doing what they're doing.
Thank you so much. Could we expect to see you maybe on the streets in November?
You never know. I think we're talking about it at the moment. So yeah, I just I don't know if I'm ready. I'm not going to lie. I don't know if I'm ready to get arrested yet. So that's what we were talking about. So yeah, might make things difficult for me, but you've got to work out where your priorities lie, I guess. So yeah, we'll see.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And get along to that non-violence training.
I need that. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Ellie. Okay, now on to another speaker. We have got the amazing Holly. Now, Holly last week took action at her university. She sprayed orange paint over the Vice Chancellor's office at Falmouth University, calling on students and staff to unite against criminal new oil and gas. Holly is an illustrator based in Cornwall. Her passion derives from the natural world and the need to protect it. Holly has been in activism for about 4 years, realizing it's the best place to make a stand to enact change. She has been supporting and active with Just Stop Oil for just over a year. So without further ado, the amazing Holly.
Hi, Emma. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I like you said, I'm an illustrator. I'm 28 years old. So I graduated a few years ago from Falmouth, and I realized I'd graduated and had been thrown into this world of expecting the kind of path we've always had of like a career, like get a job and then settle down with a family, and realizing that this was a future that didn't really exist anymore, or it wouldn't in a few years' time. So, you know, I started learning about the climate crisis when I was in school. I think a lot of people in our generation did. You know, we learned about the hockey stick graph where you got shown on the board about the CO2 emissions kind of down here and then suddenly rising up like that. And I remember as a kid being terrified what that might mean for my future, but kind of thinking that adults could handle it, so not engaging too much. And just realizing as I grew up that this problem wasn't going anywhere. In fact, it was just getting worse. I think more carbon dioxide has been released into that atmosphere since I've been born than the entirety of human history. So it just shows that it's just getting worse and worse. And I have got to the point now where I can't even think about having kids because I couldn't think about bringing them into the world, or I would look at children of this next generation and just think of the atrocities that they're going to have to face in their lifetime. And I want to look back on myself in, say, 20, 30 years' time and think I have done everything I can to make it possible to live a better future. And hopefully in 30 years' time, when I look back, that will have been possible. As George Monbiot was saying, there are social tipping points which we're hitting all the time. I can feel it in the air, you know, that we're hitting this social tipping point at the moment. And we're so close, and we just need to push for no new oil. I feel betrayed really by the generation before me. They've ruined our lives, they've ruined our futures, and we're now left with this massive problem. And universities have failed us as well. You know, they should be part of the solution. They should be showing kind of innovation and transformation, but instead they're just part of this system which is failing us. It's just completely failing us. This kind of bright graduate future that we've been fed is a lie at this point. We leave uni, like I said, with masses of debt and nothing to do with this problem. So we're living in this kind of double reality at the moment where the universities recognise that there is a crisis but are unwilling to accept their place in it and what they can do. So we've been abandoned, and all I ask that people today think, where can I fit into this movement and what can I do to help? Because we need everyone. We need, you know, leaders to lead us. We need people with influence to lead us here, because people look up to other people with influence. And I'm so glad that I took action against Falmouth University last week. I've had so many interesting and kind of deep conversations with people on a local level, at least, that have just wanted to know more about why we did it. And that's so important. You know, there's been open letters written, there's been conversations in newspapers. These are the sort of actions, they're transgressive, but they get conversations had. And now I'm going to be marching in London when it comes to November. And I'm going to be marching to arrest, because I don't know what else to do. If there were another way, you know, we would have done it already. We've had over 40 years of inaction. So I am going to be there marching to arrest in London this November. And I really ask that as many people as possible can join us. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Holly. I'll see you in November on the streets. So next up is our final speaker, who is Harley, who is here to discuss Just Stop Oil's action plans and mobilisation and why you should join. Harley used to work as an English and philosophy tutor until he got too worried about the climate crisis. Holly spent years trying to change things through traditional means with no success, and now works full-time with Just Stop Oil's Mobilization team. Over to you, Harley.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm going to keep it quite brief. So yeah, I think the key thing for me is that what's happening is that people in rich countries, like the country that I live in the UK, are unwilling to change their lifestyle. So hundreds of millions of people in the world's poorest countries are going to die. I'm going to say that again, because people like me are not willing to make changes, are not willing to take action in their own countries. Hundreds of millions of people in the world's poorest countries are going to die because of what we do or don't do in rich countries. And when I'm hearing about Carlos facing things that I don't even imagine facing, trying to take action, trying to make a change, I start to think to myself, what am I doing that I'm too scared to go to prison? What am I doing if I'm too scared to do that? So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is that we can win, and we can win with very small numbers. So Extinction Rebellion in April 2019, 600 people were arrested. That's all it was. They arrested an average of twice. It was 600 people. Within those 2 weeks, the British government set a net zero target of 2050 and declared a climate emergency. Universities all over the country declared a climate emergency. Countries all over the world declared climate emergencies and set net zero targets. From 600 people doing something for 2 weeks. And the most common outcome for those 600 people was a few £100 fine. So if it takes 600 people to do that, what are we doing? What are we doing? If it takes 600 people to make a change like that, what are we doing? Last week, a group in the Netherlands won their demand of no new fossil fuel subsidies when there was 9,000 arrests. It wasn't 9,000 people. I spoke to the organizer last week. Because of how quickly they're arrested and let free, people can get arrested 7 times in a day. But let's say it is 9,000 people. How many people are at your university? The university I went to, there were 16,000 people, and that was a small uni. If just my university went and did this, they would win and make a political change. So again, what the fuck are we doing if we're going to let hundreds of millions of the world's poorest people die because one university in the UK isn't willing to send their students down to do this? And that's all I'm going to say. There's 4 ways that you can get involved with this. The first thing is come to London and get arrested. I'm committing to get arrested at least 5 times because I've been doing this for 8 years. I've spent 8 years of my life trying to make this change. And this time I'm going as many as I can. The second thing people are doing is they're saying, I want to do this, but first I want to come to a training. I want to find out more. And they come to a non-violence training. And when I was new to this, when I was first arrested with Extinction Rebellion, I was scared. I thought, I'm not going to be able to keep tutoring. I'm not going to do the career that I wanted to do. And I went to a non-violence training and I met loads of brave people that were going to do this. And I thought, actually, I can do it. I am going to do this. So that's the second thing people are doing. The third thing people are doing is donating. And they're donating 1 hour's wages every month. So if you earn £20 an hour, £20 a month. If you earn £10 an hour, £10 a month. The fourth thing people are doing is if they're a student, they're going to a social event, which you'll be able to get a link to in the chat. They're happening all over the country. So I'll leave you with one last quick thing. We can stop the world's richest people killing the world's poorest people. We can do it. And the question is, are we going to do it? And I've been going all around this country giving talks like this. I've done over 100 talks in the past 2 years. And most people make the decision that, no, we're not going to do it. Most people that I've spoken to make the decision, I'm going to go back to my life and I'm going to pretend this isn't happening. And the question for the people in this call is, which one are you? Are you one of the people who's going to say, fuck the world's poorest people, I don't give a shit if you die? Or are you going to say, I'm going to do everything I can? Everything that I'm able to do. That's the only question we've got to ask ourselves. Right, it's 7 o'clock, so I'm finishing there. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Holly. Sometimes we just need that reality check, don't we? And I think that's what, you know, these calls are for. And I really hope that everyone on this call can take the next step. You know, if this is your first step into Just Stop Oil coming on this call, then please, from the bottom of my heart, make your next step signing up to a training, to donate, but if you can, please, to come to London and get arrested, because it will work. And it's never been more urgent, right? I mean, every day that goes past, those fractions of the degrees of warming only get more severe. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone, to all the speakers this evening. We really appreciate your time and your words and your inspiration and wisdom.